I'm Sean.
And I'm Frank. And tonight our drink is the Suffering Bastard.
Which is one of those famous tiki drinks that have been around for a long time. That we've got the Baihai Hut version of that. We're at the world famous Baihai Hut here. And it is a fantastic drink. So cheers to that. Let's talk about it. Delicious.
That's good.
That is good.
So when I was doing my research for the drink, there's actually two versions of it.
Okay.
So one was made as the remedy for the hangover the next morning.
And hence the name, the Suffering Bastard. So that was feeling pretty rough that morning after, and that was the way to cure yourself.
Drink
on
more to feel better. Exactly. So it originally had gin and brandy as the whiskey.
Ooh, not a good
stuff
mix.
in it. And then Trader Vic came up with his own version that used rum. And so the rum that we're using in this one is actually
Pusser's rum that we talked about last week. Now, Pusser's rum was one of those rums that actually was from the name Purser. If you guys saw last week's episode, was a Navy rum.
Exactly. And this was the recipe that was used on the British Navy when they stopped serving rum on board ship in 1970.
Right. So, and that is in our drinks tonight, which is the Baihai Hut version of the painkiller. Yeah. Of the Suffering Bastard. Which ties us into our history lesson for the evening. So we're talking about Suffering Bastards. What are we going to talk about tonight?
All right. So when I was thinking about this, what can I do or what can we do that is suffering? And so I thought about something that I suffer through all the time, and that is the idea of clowns. And since we're here in Sarasota, and we have Ringling here.
Yep. We've got lots of ties to clowns. So,
right.
And clowns even themselves could be seen as suffering themselves.
Yeah, they're not. So I didn't even tell Sean what the idea of this was until this afternoon, because in the past, I have gotten into my car and there have been clown heads in the seat and all kinds of other crap.
Frank has a serious phobia for the clown, so it's always a fun way to poke him.
Yeah.
So let's talk about it.
And now I'm putting this out there for everybody to see.
You're working for therapy here.
Yep. All right. So when we think about the actual idea of the clown, this goes way back in time. This goes back past the time of the court jester, all the way back to the Roman circuses, but that was with gladiators and stuff like that.
The Roman circus, even though it was called circus, it was much more of a physical fight to the death battle kind of thing. It wasn't really in the Colosseums.
And we'll talk about that, but that's kind of what we want to see sometimes in the circus with those animals, right?
That's right.
So, but the modern clown is based on a man named Joseph Grimaldi, and it's considered, they call it the white-faced clown.
Okay.
And that is also known as the Harlequin, or they use pantomime. And this is where you also get
the pantomime, the mime, where they would go out inside the box.
Yeah, another group of people that have problems. All right. But it was all about physical comedy and that idea of slapstick humor and all of that. There was no voice to it or anything. And so some clowns never talk at all in their skits and everything.
Absolutely.
So the white-faced clown became the original, and then they created two other clowns afterwards to go in with the jokes.
Okay.
So there was the austere or the red clown.
All right.
And the red clown was the recipient of all the comic things.
They're the ones that all the stuff happened to.
Yeah, the pie in the face, the squirting flower, whatever, that kind of stuff. And then they had the eccentric character clown, and he usually played some kind of profession. And here in the United States, the most common profession was the tramp or the hobo clown.
Gotcha. Okay.
All right.
So we saw three different types of clowns, and they usually work together.
Correct. And when we think about it, this is transitioning into movies and stuff like that. And some of the earliest actors were these clown type characters in Buster Keaton.
Yep.
All right. Charlie Chaplin, where they're using their physical comedy to screen because there is no voice on there.
Well, when you said the three different types, and I thought about them, and I thought about in movies specifically, three different characters that were together, who would that be?
None other than the Three Stooges.
The Three Stooges.
So, and when you think about it, so let's put it here. The white face, who's the leader of the group?
That was Mo. by far.
Right.
Yeah, he was the serious one. He was doing his thing. He's the one who did the stuff to everyone else.
Right. And so then who's the red clown, the one that always gets everything done to them?
That would have to be Curly. So I think he was the one that was always getting his tooth pulled, getting smacked, getting everything in the eyes poked.
Exactly. And then we have the character clown, or the tramp, or the hobo, which was
Larry. So he was the one that was always kind of offside and kind of drawn and brought into the whole thing, but added that comic relief.
Yeah. So the white one is a straight man, and the eccentric clown is also kind of a straight man too, while the red clown is the one that everything happens to. So here locally, we have probably one of the best examples of this white-faced clown here in Sarasota.
Well, even modern day, it's kind of evolved even too, I would think. So, and who would that be?
That would be Bello Knott.
Okay.
And he performs with Circus Sarasota. He's been on America's Got Talent. His daughter's been on there.
Probably the most famous modern day clown that we have.
And he just doesn't do the clowning and the skits, but he is actually a master acrobatic as well.
A physical stuntman.
Yeah.
And the amazing thing with him too is that we've seen almost we've gone away from the makeup to where he's still accentuating. He's got the crazy hair that goes up and then he's accentuating, but it's a little bit of a different look.
Yeah, it's really funny to watch him when he's doing his skits with because it's waving all over the place.
Out TV and exactly.
All right. Now the guy who kind of set this forth in the 1950s that made the clown part of television and all of that was Bozo the Clown.
Probably every child of that era remembers Bozo the Clown up into the 70s and 80s.
Yeah. Now, who was Bozo the Clown? Who played him? Anybody? You know?
The original Bozo the Clown who started it? Yeah. I knew it was based out of Chicago.
Yeah.
So who was the original Bozo the Clown?
Willard Scott.
The Weatherman?
The Weatherman.
So Willard, he started out, he was the original Bozo the Clown.
He was not just the original Bozo the Clown, but he was also the man who came up with Ronald McDonald for the McDonald's chain. And he actually
and did clowns as well.
Now, I wish I would have known this all those years I was watching them on the news doing the weather, that he was just joking around and never went.
I think most weathermen, who knows?
So that I found really interesting when you look at it. But when you think about the character and stuff that he played, he was always that happy, always that cheerful individual.
Well, and even now that I go back and think about him as a weatherman, his inflections, his stuff was all tied to that same piece.
Exactly. Now, this takes us into like the 60s and 70s, really 70s and 80s. And the idea of the clown begins to change, and we get another iteration of the clown.
And this is probably the clown that you grew up with that has terrified you.
Exactly. And this is the evil clown.
Oh, okay.
All right. Now, the evil clown goes all the way back to the 1940s.
Okay. So the 1940s, I would think, evil clown, who would that be?
Well, you go back to the comic book era, the beginning of the comic book era.
And Batman.
And you get the Joker. Okay. And then you get the iteration of the Joker in the 1960s on the Batman show.
Yep.
And that made it, white face, all of that kind of
stuff.
And
the laugh and the eccentric hair and everything too, all tied in together with that clown.
And you can see all the iterations that we have had of the Joker over the past 30 years.
Yeah.
In the movies, in animation, in the comic book, all of that. And we keep seeing new ones created.
Yeah.
Right.
But still with that tie, that piece of the clown.
Yeah. Now, the clown that scared the living crap out of me was Pennywise.
From Stephen King's It.
Yeah.
Yes.
And that one has never left. And
I think that was Stephen King's probably his one of his masterpieces and probably one of his most terrifying characters. And actually, once again, a Sarasota tie. Stephen King actually winners here in Sarasota. So,
right.
Yeah.
And then there's another one that becomes famous during this period of time, the 70s and 80s. And he is a serial killer rapist.
That's John Wayne Gacy.
Yeah.
Yes.
And
who also dressed for children's birthday parties as a clown.
Right. Pogo the Clown.
Pogo the Clown.
So we see that this iteration of the clown comes to be. And I was reading in there a study from the University of Sheffield done in the early 2000s. Yeah. And to quote it, it says that clowns are universally disliked by children. some found to be quite frightening.
Ah.
And I have never thought of clowns as
And the funny thing is that,
nice people.
and that probably has never happened before our generation. You know what I mean? That was always, it was seen as something positive, something fun.
Yeah.
So it's amazing how it's changed.
But then that has become really part of the culture.
Yeah.
So in movies, you have movies like Killer Clowns from Outer Space, things like that.
Yeah.
In music, you get
in music.
Who's the big one in music?
I would say Insane Clown Posse, the modern ones. Yep.
Yep. And they have a huge following, and their followers do the white face and all of that, and they're called juggalos. And so sometimes you see them around, and
not your everyday Bozo the Clown.
Right.
Yeah.
And their music is kind of interesting too, because a lot of their songs go with this idea of the dark carnival. And when I think of that, I think of the movie The Vampire's Apprentice, I think it is, with where he's a vampire, but he's in the circus, and he gets an apprentice, and then it's following the evil side. Or you could see it in American Horror Stories in their
they brought it into modern culture all the way around.
Yeah. Now there's one other type of clown that we should mention, and that's the rodeo clown.
Oh, excellent. Never even thought to compare that too. So the rodeo clown, once again, we see the makeup, we see that. We don't see an evil clown though, or don't even really see a funny clown as much as a helpful one.
Right. And willing to put his body between yours when you get bucked off a bronco or
a bull's chasing you.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Right. Now that kind of draws us here to Sarasota, because Sarasota is where Ringling Brothers wintered, and
all the way from the 19 teens and 20s to really into the late 1900s.
Yeah, and so what we're going to see is they are going to decide that there's not a lot of clowns that are coming up in the circus, and
kind of a lost art.
Right, and so most of their clowns starting in the 1940s and 50s were in their 50s, and they weren't going to be able to do this gag humor too much longer.
Right.
So they decided to create a clown college
to bring the next generation and to educate them.
Yeah. And so it's going to start in Venice, and it's going to be there for about 30 years until the founder, a man named Feld, dies.
Mm-hmm.
And then they're going to take it to Wisconsin for a couple years, and then they'll bring it back down here to Sarasota, and it'll last a couple years, and then it'll go defunct. But I can just picture this, being a teacher, right? Thinking about graduation. The mom clowns with the makeup running as they're crying, all right?
How would the walk across stage be with big floppy shoes?
Exactly. Diplomas with disappearing ink, all that kind of stuff.
Exactly.
So there's a whole skit right there that you could go 100%. Do. So, or imagine your first day at college, and you get classes like,
well, I think, normally biology 101, chemistry, English lit, different things. What would you take at clown college?
You had makeup application, you had costume design, you had acrobatics, juggling, stilt walking, but my favorite was film studies. So they would go on and they would watch the movies of Charlie Chaplin, Buster Keaton, all of those guys, but they also looked at Wile E. Coyote and Bugs Bunny as some of those characters as well.
Yeah.
Now, there's a whole list of people that graduated from there, but there were three big names that I think most people would know.
So these are graduates of the clown college from here down in Venice or in Sarasota here.
Yeah, I think they were all probably down in Venice.
Yeah.
So the first one is Penn Jillette.
Oh, Penn and Teller.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Okay.
And he is that kind of the white clown because he's always the straight man.
Exactly. But still has that physical presence and everything about him. So okay.
So he graduated.
I can see that. That's a good one. I can see that.
And then another one is William Irwin.
William Irwin. I'm not familiar with William Irwin.
All right. So for us, we would have not seen him as kids or whatever. We would have seen him with our children watching television.
Okay.
He was on Sesame Street, and he was Mr. Noodle.
Oh, Mr. Noodle. I remember that.
On
kids were young.
Road.
Gotcha. Okay. So he graduated from the same clown college as well. Okay.
And probably for us, the one that we recognize the most is Steve-O from Jackass.
Steve-O. Okay. Which makes sense for him doing that.
Yeah, because you think
got
about
that physical comedy by himself.
Right. And doing the stupid stunts and all the different things that they tried. And he really kind of also plays into, I think, the Jackass idea plays into that idea of clowns but also plays into the idea of the freak show. And that's kind of, to me, the darker side of the circus.
That was all part of the circus and almost kind of ran together in that same genre.
Yeah, and that has a huge tie here to Florida, because when the circus would come down and weather here, we saw that all their people would come down here. And in Gibtown or Gibsonton, Florida, which is just north of us, there's a whole community of circus families.
The freak show was different was different from the clown. The clown was almost revered, and was kind of the upper tier of the circus world, whereas the freak show was a little bit probably on a darker side.
Yeah, and it was about the oddities. It was about kind of scaring you. To me, it's what clowns do to me today.
Yeah.
And they use them back then. And so it was interesting because as I was doing my research, it really focused on people who were not white, all right, and that they could create exotic stories for them, or they had birth defects or oddities about them. So like Siamese twins, or conjoined twins, as we would call them today, or
little people, or giants, or any type of oddity like that.
Bearded women, that kind of stuff. And so that's what we're going to see really happen with the freak show. And this goes all the way back to the early 1800s. And this is where P.T. Barnum really comes in.
Well, one of his most famous was probably Tom Thumb.
Right. So Tom Thumb stopped growing at about 6 months old, was about 25 inches tall, weighed about 15 pounds. But he met Queen Victoria. He met Abraham Lincoln. He traveled all over and was making at that time $150 a week.
So he was doing well.
He was doing really well. But I would say that for every Tom Thumb, there was 100 other ones that were really being exploited.
Yeah.
Now, his biggest moneymaker, though, was not Tom Thumb.
Really?
It was the Tattooed Man,
which is probably very unusual in the day. Not as unusual now, but unusual in the day. How amazing! How times change.
And he had over 300 different tattoos on his body, and each of them had a story that he could tell.
Gotcha.
And that was kind of the draw. People would come in and he would show whatever, and then talk about it. And P.T. Barnum actually initially created a museum for all of these oddities.
Okay.
Right? And you can see an iteration of this, a version of it, in the movie The Greatest Showman that just came out.
Yes.
Now, this is completely Disneyfied, all right? It is not what it really
probably
was
not
like.
as nice and happy they weren't dancing around happy at the time. Yes. A little bit more oppression going on.
Right. And but things like the fire in the movie really happened, and the amount of negativity and violence towards them, I think, really happened, but even in a larger style or a larger amount. So that is really going to be the dark side to it.
Sure.
So the freak show. What else did I want to say with that? Oh, I wanted to talk about one other individual in here. So probably the most famous of these individuals that we call the freak show was Joseph Merrick.
The Elephant Man.
Exactly. Yes. And so his story has been made into movies. The story's been told, and they studied him.
I think Michael Jackson went to buy his bones for a while. That was part of
another one of those weird things that he did.
Exactly.
So as we look at that is going to be kind of that oddities thing. And we still see that there's lots of these things that are happening today, but we have normalized them, and we don't look at them as the freaks as whatever. But like in Jackass, they use a dwarf to do certain stunts with them to make it funnier.
Comedy.
To make it funnier, because he's smaller and they can't use children to do
exactly right.
Things. So he's the next.
He can sign the waiver. So
you can still go up. There's still a small community up in Gibsonton of the show folk that are up there. We have
carnies, as we call them.
Yeah. Another scary group of people. So that is kind of our thing for today, looking at the Suffering Bastard.
Suffering Bastard, the drink, the hangover drink, fantastic, and it ties into that. What's our drink for next week?
Our drink for next week is the third in the Pusser trilogy.
Gotcha. Okay.
and that is the Painkiller, and that's their signature drink.
That's the one they're famous for. So,
Yeah.
and only Pusser's rum can be used for a true painkiller.
Yeah, and I believe it's only this one here,
which is the gunpowder strength.
Yeah.
So.
So that is what we're going to be doing next week.
Yeah.
So those of you who are here, one of the things that we would love for you to do is, this is our 6th show in the season.
Yeah.
We've kind of hit our stride and stuff like that.
And for all of you at home watching as well,
we would love for you to go on to TripAdvisor and put a good review in for the Baha'i Hut, and especially mention us.
Frank is 5 stars.
Yeah, I am 5 stars. All right. Or go on to Google and do it as well.
Yep.
This way we can get more people out here to see us and share more of this information and everything.
And for those of you guys who aren't here, after our show is done, you guys get to see our history broadcast. But then after, we host a trivia night. So we're going to have fun in a few minutes, play a little music, have some trivia that'll be actually kind of focused a little bit around our topic for the evening, which is the circus and clowns. So it should be a good time.
Yep. So we'll see you next week, same time, and enjoy your week.
Have a great one, guys.